Let me ask you a couple of issues about, I feel like I have a good sense for your worldview. I have, I think, a pretty good idea generally of where you're going to come down on an issue. Things that you say rarely surprise me because I think they come from a coherent worldview that I understand. I have to say, though, in the past month or so, there have been some things you've said that have really confounded me and surprised me. And so I want to ask you about those. You had referenced earlier the fact that you essentially are one of the most censored people on the internet over the last, decades, starting when you were from a very young kid. Like, you were just banished from every platform, YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. And, you were finally restored by Elon on X. Fortunately, Rumble is a platform that I think is one of the truly genuine defenders of free speech on the internet that has enabled you to have a show on there. I don't think you'll ever be canceled there, but by and large, you suffered this extreme amount of big tech censorship based on a theory that said that your views were so dangerous that you were essentially provoking, if not implicitly or explicitly encouraging violence against various minority groups. Whether that's true or not, that was the theory used to justify your censorship. And yet, after Charlie Kirk's assassination, you yourself started to sound a lot to me like those very people who demanded your censorship. You put up one tweet, I think we have it here, about Hassan Piker. And I just want to get the exact language. Do we have this tweet? Yeah, you said, we don't know the whole story. I don't think this is the tweet. I think it's the one about Hassan Piker, where you basically called for Hassan. Yeah, you said, it was very direct. You said, quote, Hassan Piker should be banned on Twitch and then deported back to Turkey. And before our side starts to cry about hypocrisy, remember that you can't say the word retard on the platform, but you can openly incite murder against conservatives. Enough is enough. And then you'd also said, we don't really, put that other tweet back on. You said, we don't really know much about who the shooter is and what the official story is, but we know that tens of thousands of leftists celebrated his public execution for expressing basic conservative opinions. They must be held accountable regardless. So my questions are, have you changed your mind about censorship, or have you always been of the view that it's only wrong against conservatives but okay against the left? And what did you mean when you said the people who celebrated Charlie Kirk's death have to be held accountable? And what kind of accountability were you talking about?
Well, my views on censorship are that I guess I just don't buy this idea that if we are in principle against censorship, then we can avoid these slippery slopes and everybody is able to participate in this public space. But that's not, in effect, actually how it works. I remain censored. And when the left was in power, they used that power to censor me. I believe that if the left gets power again, they're going to censor again. And what's really sort of incumbent there is that the right wing needs to win. So somebody like Hassan Piker, for example, he thinks I'm a Nazi. He basically is antagonizing or instigating his followers all the time. When they say things like punch Nazis, you're a Nazi, this is, in effect, green-lighting violence. And we do see this all the time. I mean, you have left-wing people that are going around shooting up churches, assassinating figures like Charlie Kirk, shooting at somebody like Donald Trump. Hassan Piker didn't even talk about me for many years because he said, we don't platform Nazis. He got me banned on Twitch. It was after I won a debate with him in 2019, I think it was, that him and Destiny ran it up the flagpole and got me kicked off the platform because I won the debate. And so, I just don't subscribe to the idea that when the right wing is in power, we're going to protect the rights of the left. Then we're going to wait for the left to get power and they're going to crush us. They're going to get us censored. They're going to get us deported, all those things. So if I were dictator of America, I would have free speech forever. But unfortunately, we are in this competition. I don't support hate speech legislation, but I do think that when the right is in power, we should take these opportunities to disempower the people that would try to suppress us in the future. I think that's just, unfortunately, the reality of power in politics.
And the people who said, I'm glad to see Charlie Kirk dead because I think the world is better off without such a malicious or destructive voice. When you said they ought to be held accountable, what kind of accountability were you hoping for?
That they get fired from their jobs. I think that, and I'll say there's another dimension to this too. we clearly do have a problem with political violence. Like there's polls out there that say 30% of liberals in Generation Z believe that political violence is legitimate. When Luigi Mangione assassinated that CEO, he was lionized as like a sexual icon and like a hero. Thomas Crook shot Trump and they said he should get better aim. Charlie Kirk was murdered. And you have thousands of liberals actually publicly celebrating it because they think that his views are so radical, like he signed his own death warrant. They believe that he forfeited his life. And I think that on some level, if you want to have free speech, you really can't tolerate that. And I don't think they should be penalized in any way because they hated Charlie Kirk or they disagreed with him. I disagreed with him. I didn't like him. But if you're celebrating political violence, especially in a very sensitive moment like that, it's not forever. It's not in a year, 5 years, whatever. But if the country's sort of on the brink of a breakdown, clearly there is this problem. I don't actually think it could be tolerated. And by that, I mean that I think that society has to make it clear that that's not acceptable. If you think it's acceptable to shoot people in the face because you disagree with them, you're not welcome in society, which means you're not going to be employed. You're not going to be allowed to attend a university. I think that's a reasonable place to draw the line, because otherwise I think you spiral into total chaos. And I would feel the same way about...
You have advocated views that not just people on the left and not just liberals, but people in Republican circles and conservative circles have also regarded as so pernicious and so odious that they ought not to be even permitted into society. And that is what has led to you being put on the no-fly list and being debanked and being censored and suppressed in all sorts of ways. Now, I understand the tendency to say, look, if that happened to me, now that I'm in power and I can do it to the people who did it to me, I want to do it back to them. Maybe this is the constitutional lawyer in me that is just, kind of living in these abstract clouds. But I know personally I've been able to represent, neo-Nazis and people on the far right in their free speech rights and win by citing the cases from the 1950s that defended the free speech rights of communists. And I've been able to do the same for the left by citing these precedents on the right in a way that holding these principles is actually ending up in a way that benefits everybody. But let me just press a little bit on this violence issue, because I'll tell you the very first time that I encountered this theory that political rhetoric can generate violence in a way that ought to be held accountable there was this spate of abortion doctors in the 1990s. I know we're roughly the same age. I don't remember it because I was too young either. Maybe you don't either. But there was like 4 or 5 abortion doctors who were killed in a very short period of time, one of whom was constantly profiled on Bill O'Reilly's show as a particularly pernicious practitioner of abortion, somebody who would just do huge numbers of baby killings, including later term ones. Even though they were illegal, he thought they were immoral. People watched that show. They went and they murdered abortion doctors. People tried to blame that on Bill O'Reilly, said that his language was so incendiary that he was actually inspiring violence. And then it happened even more recently. You had this spate of massacres, this white supremacist massacre, the one in Buffalo at the supermarket where they went and murdered a bunch of black people, the Dylan Roof one in Charleston. There was a guy who went and killed a bunch of Latinos in an El Paso Walmart. And there was a very concerted liberal media Democratic Party effort to say, the Tucker Carlsons and the anti-immigrants and the people who with racist rhetoric like yourself have blood on your hands, because even though you don't advocate violence, the kind of rhetoric you're using is enough to provoke it and inspire it. Are you a little bit concerned that if you attach yourself to that theory when you can and can be effective in persecuting those on the other side, that you're strengthening those weapons to be used against you as well?
No, because I don't think it's a question of whether we can draw lines. It's just, where do we draw those lines? And I think this is pretty explicit and clear, where this is actually inciting. Again, it's not saying that if you oppose a certain figure or if you disagree with a certain figure. A very high-profile figure was murdered, probably by an ideological partisan, and the same day that it happened, people are publicly celebrating in the mainstream media. They're downplaying it. To me, that's such a particular set of circumstances. I just think it's a no-brainer, and I think society sort of agreed. Even though society is pretty liberal and the institutions are pretty liberal, I think even there was a sort of mea culpa on the side of left-wing people that said, yeah, this is a little out of control. This is clearly a problem. This is kind of like a clear and present imminent danger. Because we're not saying it's rhetoric. We're saying you're literally celebrating and justifying murder. And I think that it'd be much more clear cut. Let's say, for example, after Dylan Roof shot up a church full of black people, if a bunch of like normie Republicans were on TikTok saying, let's go, that's awesome, we need more of that, you would rightfully say this is kind of dangerous. You know, the right wing never, normies, and I don't even think the fringe is the right, never did anything like that, because there have been instances of legitimate far-right political violence, and it is almost universally always condemned, with the exception of extremely marginal, anonymous elements that are few in number on the internet. This was like mainstream normies, and with the backing of the institutions that were saying more murder, more assassinations, take more shots at right-wing people. That's as clear as it gets. So I guess the disagreement is, I don't think there's any problem with drawing lines. It's just, where do you draw the lines? And this is a pretty clear-cut case where you say, and by the way, I'm not even saying there should be government censorship. I'm saying that as a society, individuals need to, and institutions need to reject this for the sake of society, for the sake of the whole, because, obviously people could see where this is headed. I mean, you encourage that, you sexualize it in some ways. Every schizophrenic is watching the reaction that Luigi Mangione and all these others got, and they're making plans. And that's sort of sick. We kind of all need to hold the line against like demonic, nihilistic evil like that.
Right. I should just quickly say that Hassan Piker was somebody who was watching the assassination of Charlie Kirk in real time and actually chided his chat for expressing these views that it was a positive thing. And I think that was self-interested, because Hassan Piker makes a lot of public appearances, was actually scheduled to debate Charlie Kirk the next month at Dartmouth, and I think felt almost maybe like you did that this was the sort of thing that can threaten anybody, any of us who express views that make other people angry, who appear in public in order to do it. But he wasn't somebody celebrating the death. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.